A very good evening to all our mentorship traders. We are on the 14th of August 2020, Friday evening, 9 o'clock as usual, our evening session. We talk about the markets, the index, the bank nifty, few sectors, few hot stocks, and then we move on to discuss about your experience this week, your doubts, your questions, your trades. So what do we have in our hands right now? Well, it was a nasty move today, wasn't it? What it did today is essentially, take care of almost 6 days of price behavior taken care by just 1 day's range. Now, I have been kind of boring enough to keep on repeating the words cautious, careful, stay light with your long trades. It's primarily because of this, the fact that we could clearly see the underlying momentum of the market slipping off, driving itself up, but sharply coming down when it was coming down. So this is one such example. Are we looking at a double top in the making? I don't know. I do not predict patterns anymore. And but if this is a double top, then it's going to get triggered or it's going to get activated only below 10,900. However, we are at 11,000, close to 11,200. What we have in our hands is this kind of a move that we saw today afternoon. This is a 75-minute chart of the Nifty futures, and the important thing for me here on this chart are these two channels. If you're not getting a hang of the channel, the first one, that was bad. This was drawn very bad. So first one is this, the yellow one over here, and the second one is this one. So as I can see, the market broke below channel number 1. Let's call this channel number 1, and let's call this channel number 2. So the market broke below the channel number 1, and every time it managed to bounce back, it was the upper border of the channel which was giving resistance, and now it's just touched the lower border of channel number 2. If this goes, then of course we are looking at 10,900 as a possible retest. Over here I have 10,800 close to these lows. Possibility of that is very high. Considering it was a big and sharp fall, it can be a zigzag kind of a move, so bounce backs can be used to sell. But it's too early to predict all these kind of moves. I'm neither being bearish nor being bullish right now. I'm going to be very observant next week for sure. But this is a very important support for me from a short-term perspective. Taking a look at the weekly chart, considering the fact when I look into my momentum indicators, the way they have, placed themselves, the chances of, the chances of the index testing sub 11K is definitely there. 10,900, 800 kind of levels is definitely there. And I think it is good for this larger bounce back. If this bounce back has to go back to its previous highs, like most of the sectors, like the IT has done, other stocks like Reliance has done. So if the Nifty has to do this, then it needs to create some space, some headroom, some space on the upside. And to create some space on the upside, it needs to come off. So 10,800 shouldn't be a surprise. If those kind of levels come, you should not be too worried. But I would continue my view on the Nifty to be careful, to be cautious. And if this pattern shapes up, then of course it's going to try and retest that level of 10,800, 900. Taking a look at the sectors, what I've done is I've run performance of 1 week. That's the first column. And the performance of over last 4 weeks, that's the second column. So why 4 weeks? When I looked at the weekly chart of Nifty, all I see was the week ended 24th July. The index was at 11,170, more or less stayed there the next week and the week after, and this week also it's slipped to 11,186. So kind of I would say trading in terms of time or consolidation. Last 4 weeks or typically last 3 weeks, the index has been volatile, choppy, but it has not gained any direction either on the upside or the downside. So I thought, let's see in these 4 weeks, which are the sectors which have performed. So metals takes it away. Pharma, big move. Small cap and mid cap. And then auto. And of course, IT. So these are some good names, especially when you look at IT, they're down, and auto. Metals to some extent, yes. Pharmaceutical is a long-term underperformer, which is trying to bounce back. But the gainers over the last 4 weeks have been pretty good. What about this week? If the media doesn't count, it's primarily because of stocks like Z. Metals definitely continues to move up. Pharma, I thought would slow down, but it doesn't seem to be in any mood. And then we have small and mid cap. So very similar performance we see when we saw it in terms of 4 weeks or last 1 week. But when you look at the other side of the list, that is very, very evident. That's the private sector banks. That's the bank Nifty, that's the financial services. So few sectors which I strongly believe that will continue to show strength and will rally further up from here on. Will be metals, look to buy on a dip, pharma to buy on a dip. In fact, the mid and small caps are also showing very strong strength in the underlying trend. When these small, mid cap, pharmaceuticals, metals, when these sectors cool off, they will find support. Very, very high chances they will find support for a bounce back. Add auto to that, add IT to that, and I would say add a bit of FMCG to that. So I'll name them again: FMCG, IT, auto, mid, small cap, pharma, and metals. I feel that these are the sectors which will find good support when they come off, and they should be look to buy on a dip. The issue is with the private sector banks. The issue is a bit with the financial services, the bank Nifty as well. Energy is primarily led by Reliance Industries, but it has done very good. It's going to face some resistance at the top here. But I think it's the banking which can drag the index down. It has dragged the index down this week. It has dragged the index down for the last 4 weeks. The same sector, Nifty private banks. So the likes of Kotak Bank, the likes of ICICI Bank are the ones which are vulnerable and can drag the index down. So do not be very, very optimistic and positive on these banking stocks right now. You can trade them on a bounce back, but do not add them on in your long-term portfolio as of now. If I run this scan, this report designer within the, let's say, Nifty 50 stocks, there you go. We can clearly see that it's the metals that takes it away. It's the JSW Steel, Tata Steel, then you have Tata Motors, poor stock, underperformer for a huge time period, bouncing back, not much to take away. And then there's likes of ITs like Tech Mahindra, HCL Tech. Now, let's talk about IT. Let me pull up the IT index or the stocks which make up the IT index. All right. So IT will also be a very, very interesting space to look for in short-term dips. As of now, don't see any dips. Maybe Infosys can slow down a little bit, followed by TCS. TCS will be a very, very interesting stock to look at. I think first half of next week itself. I can see that the stock has been coming off for 6 consecutive days now, back to its previous lows from where it bounced back. So this is a typical swing long candidate. Look to buy on a Monday or Tuesday. I'm very, very confident it's going to give us a move. It's going to be probably a short-term move, because when I look at the weekly charts, I can clearly see a bearish engulfing. I can clearly see divergence shaping up, which means that the intermediate time frame is getting ready to come down. And while it comes down, it will give these kind of zigzags. So TCS and Infosys can be looked into as prospective short-term long candidates. I'm more short-term bullish on TCS than Infosys, but purely from a short-term perspective. We were talking about banks, and within the banking, ICICI Bank completely range bound. This is the daily chart of ICICI Bank. This is the weekly chart of ICICI Bank. We can see an attempt was done 3 weeks back. It was a breakout, and it was a breakout failure. In fact, a break below 340, and you should not be looking into ICICI Bank for a few weeks for sure. I'm purely talking from a long-term investment perspective. Then there's the likes of Axis Bank, similar kind of story, struggling. Bandhan Bank is definitely in a downtrend. The stock has come off for almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days now. It's creating some divergences on the 75-minute time frame I checked. So it can be a short-term bounce back candidate, but weak. Kotak Bank, look at the weekly chart. Don't you see very, very similar range-bound behavior? Similarly, HDFC Bank is relatively better, much better. Similar situation there in IndusInd Bank, RBL Bank, and IDFC, though I don't track it that closely, is kind of being a rebel and is given a breakout. But my point is, it's the banking, the large cap private sector banks, which is not performing in this market, and on the other hand, it is actually dragging the index down. So be careful when you're trading in these counters. Looking to short on a rise would be a better idea rather than going for longs. Long trades should be kept as minimal, or I would say short-term in nature. Do not hold on to too many long positions overnight, and try and keep your bet size limited, small. I continue my overall view on the market to be the same 2 words of being cautious and careful. The index is to some extent directionless, or I would say it had a direction, but it is lagging a lot of momentum, and that can take the index down. So I think a bumpy week is coming up next week again. So trade to your best, and these are not the best of weeks to make a lot of money, but to sail through the tough times, so that when it starts to trend again, beautiful trend up and down, that's when we will recover and make better returns. All right, so that's the call on the Nifty and the sectors. Let's start our usual session. For the rest of the evening, we'll talk about your doubts and questions and the experience you had this week with your trades.